Hello viewers, welcome to Blitz Audios. Today we're going to narrate a story. This is called Rangappa's Festival of Lights. It's written by Masti Venkatesh Iyengar and it details the story of Rangappa, a newly married husband, and his interactions with his wife during the Festival of Lights, that's Diwali. Note that this is the direct sequel to the highly acclaimed story Ranga's Marriage. Let's begin, shall we? Having told you of Rangappa's marriage, I propose to tell you of the first Festival of Lights for which he was invited by his uncle-in-law. Ammayya is Rangappa's younger sister, some 7 or 8 years old, and a very smart child. When she grows up and marries, she will give no end of trouble to her husband, I'm sure. What trouble, do you ask? Well, trouble all round. He will speak to her and she will keep mum. He will try to go near her and she will walk away. When she does speak, she will speak in a very crooked way. Altogether, the fellow who marries her is destined to a muckle of botheration. I'm very happy that I'm not a young fellow awaiting marriage. Supposing I had been, who knows, I might not have had the bad luck to come across her and become her husband. And then what should have happened to me? I started to tell you of Rangappa's Festival of Lights, and I'm speaking of his sister, Ammayya. The reason for this is that I got the information about the doings of that festival from Ammayya. She was of the party that went with Rangappa to his uncle-in-law's house. How should I know what occurred there? Rangappa, of course, could not tell me. What he had done was not a thing of which he could be proud. Ratnamma will not tell of her husband's bothering her and her own girlish stupidity. How can so young a wife speak of these things? Rangappa's mother might tell, it's true. But when is she to sit at leisure and talk of this to me? Almost the only person, therefore, from whom I could get any information about this business was Ammayya. And from her, I ascertained everything. And that's why I started with describing her. Somehow, in such matters, children are exceedingly quick. They remember clearly whatever they see. I may give this to you as a warning. If at any time you feel, whether from inclination or sense of duty, as if you would give your wife a kiss, pray make sure that there are no children near about. Do not say, oh, they're just children, and ignore them. For their being just children is what makes them dangerous. They will note what you do and tell everyone in the house, and everyone will believe whatever they say. Why? They're innocent children, you know. Between their accuracy and their imaginary innocence, you are left no foothold for your self-respect. In saying this, I am having in mind mainly the younger people. I need not say that the warning applies even more strongly to elderly people. If a child should say that an elderly husband kissed his elderly wife, all the people will be astounded and ask what had possessed these persons to behave in that way at such an age. Suppose that you, who are reading this, are an elderly husband. Consider what a laughing stock you will become. Ammayya did this to me on one occasion. I used to take her to my house frequently for helping me and my wife to beguile an afternoon. When our own grandchildren are with us, we have no difficulty in spending the time. But they're not always with us, and when they're away, the afternoons drag. So I take a child from some neighboring house, and I and my wife play with it and spend the time. It's easy to imagine for us that it's one of our grandchildren. My wife is even fonder of children than I. I have found that she turns out more work when children are hanging around her neck and crying and bothering her than when the house is empty and she's all by herself. Having brought up a number of children, she's unhappy when she has not some child to look after. She bore her first child when 16 and has always till now had the charge of her own children or her children's children. Not only does she do more work when the children are bothering her, she even feels more restful. Once, when I had taken Amaya to my house in this way, a thing happened. It was 3 in the afternoon, and I was lying full length upon my mat. My wife came and sat at some little distance, combing her hair. I said to her for fun, "Why don't you comb my hair also?" She said, "What's the great object of combing your hair?" I said, "The pity of it is, you're my first and only wife. As I have grown old, you have also grown old, and you feel no need to think of me. Supposing it was a second wife or a third one, would she have neglected me as you're doing?" "Well," said my wife, "today you feel as if you would have your hair combed. Tomorrow you might feel as if you would have a second wife." She smiled, saying it, and seemed exceedingly charming. I remember how my mother looked in her old age. My wife has all the grave charm that my mother had, and along with that, a certain playfulness that we generally associate with a girl of 16. I said, "I find it hard enough to quell the 2 cats that frequently quarrel in our house. If I should bring another woman into it, and you two should begin to quarrel, what is to happen to me?" Saying this, I moved up to my wife and playfully gave her a kiss. Amaya was looking on. She did not know that I meant well by her adopted grandmother. She thought I was doing some harm and lifted her hand as if to beat me and said, "Hey, hey, don't hurt Granny." Then she saw that I did no harm and sat down again, thinking, no doubt, that it was because of her threat that I desisted from hurting her grandmother. What is this all for, do you say? You will know presently. The Festival of Lights is for young people the only real festival. If you're married, you know why I say so. Ask yourself if there's any festival to equal it, and you will find there really is none. Especially, there's never any festival to equal the first festival in which you visited the house of your father-in-law. There are various reasons for this. In the first place, you are a grand person and the chief guest in the house of the man whose daughter you have married. In the second place, you have a chance of conducting yourself before your wife, as the great person you are. In the third place, only provided you're sufficiently enterprising, you have a chance to speak to that wife, or at the least, of stopping her in some narrow passage in the house and trying to speak. Altogether, in the life of every young man amongst our people, the Festival of Lights is a festival of passing importance. I am, of course, referring to people of the old way of life. What I say may not apply to people of the new style, who are too civilized to have the needs and impulses of the life that we lived. The boy and girl of these days will have spoken to each other even before marriage. What would they know of our way of life, in which the exchange of the first words was an event of first-rate importance, like the establishment of friendly or other relations between 2 sovereign states? Besides, for some reason, the grandeur of son-in-lawdom has declined in these days. What else would you expect? A son-in-law nowadays does not object to stay in his father-in-law's house for a year together. How can any fellow, though never so young, be grand for a whole year? Almost the only person who might fear him for an entire year is the poor mother-in-law. If our young fellows took the advice which their wives give them indirectly in the days of the marriage ceremony, they would not commit the mistake of staying with their parents-in-law for such length of time. For what do the humorous verses repeated by our girls say? If you come to your mother-in-law's house and wish to have a pleasant time, stay for 3 days and leave on the 4th. Our boys stay not for 3 days, but for 3 years. How can the stay be pleasant, much less grand? Rangappa's festival was of the old style. Before that first festival of lights, in which he went to his father-in-law's house, he had not exchanged words with his wife. It's true that on the day of the marriage, going with his wife from the wedding seat to the shrine in the house for jointly adoring God, he seemed to try to talk to her and make her talk. He could not do this when sitting on the wedding seat for the ceremony. Later also, with other people standing around, there was no chance. The only chance that the bridegroom has of trying this kind of thing is when he catches the poor bride alone somewhere or another. One of these very rare occasions is when you are taking your wife to the shrine. People who watched Rangappa then could see his lips moving through the voice was not audible. Ratnamma, however, though she might have heard the muttering of her eager husband, kept her mouth shut. No doll could have had more motionless lips. I asked Rangappa later what it was he was trying to his wife. When you were taking her to the shrine, I thought your lips were moving and you were saying something to her. What am I to say to her? You know these girls. I told you long ago. Supposing I said something, how was she to understand? That is, Ratna is not a grown-up girl like Shakuntala. That's the trouble. It is the trouble, said Rangappa. I understood that he had said something and had received no response. Going to the Festival of Lights, Rangappa was full of spirits. Ratnamma lived in her uncle's house. When Rangappa and his party went to Ratna's house, the girl was standing in the garden beside the house. You may be sure that she was full of expectancy and that her heart went fast when she heard the sound of the carriage. She had seen Rangappa first when she was singing the song about Krishna in my house. That was before marriage. In the marriage, sitting on the wedding seat, she had stolen looks at him some few times when she thought that no one was watching. After that, this was the first occasion when she would be seeing him. The poor thing treasured the incidents of her marriage, detail after detail in her memory. It delighted her to think of her husband and herself sitting beside each other and playing with flowers. When the priest asked her husband to call her daughter of the mother-in-law, his mother had told him to call her daughter of donkey. Whatever for the words of these, mother-in-law and donkey, rhyme in Kannada, I do not know, but they do. This is the usual humor, but it's new in every marriage. Ratnamma was angry at being called daughter of a donkey, so she returned the compliment by describing her husband as a very ugly man. He smiled bitterly, and she felt that she had punished him for having called her daughter of a donkey. But he went on with the play with flowers, and thus, without a single moment of real talk between them and in a huge crowd, they dealt in love. During all those days, Ratna had been aware of nothing but the young man she was marrying. The whole house seemed full of him and of thoughts of him. Without doubt, that was the case with the boy too. He was aware only of the girl he was marrying, and the house to him seemed full of her and of the thought of her. Though she knew who was coming, Ratnamma walked up to the door of the house as though she did not know. Her mother-in-law got down from the carriage first, then Rangappa, and then the others. If Ratnamma came to make sure who had come, should she not have gone in immediately after seeing the mother-in-law? No, she stayed there until Rangappa got down and went in thereafter. The young man had seen her even as she was in the garden. There was a grape plant in the garden. It had grown well and spread and was hanging down from its supports. The creepers were long and tender, and played in the wind. There, like a creeper amidst those creepers, with limbs which in tenderness laughed at the tender shoots of the grape, and with movements graceful like the swaying of the shoots, he first noticed the girl standing. He noticed, too, her walking from there to the door of the house. He saw her still there when he got down and knew that she cared for him, and said to himself that he would try his best to make her speak to him this time. That evening, when they were seated together for receiving the blessings of the elders, Rangappa saw that Ratnama would not sit close to him. She sat as far as she could on the very edge of the seat. Her aunt and his mother and all the other ladies who had gathered tried ever so much to persuade her to sit nearer, but she would not. Perhaps she does not like to sit near me. I shall go, said Rangappa, and got up. Then she moved a little nearer. Whether she moved nearer for fear her husband would go away, or for the other fear that if he did go away, the assembly would blame her for obstinacy, I am unable to say. The probability is that she wanted him to stay. So moving a very little nearer in several stages, she reduced the distance between him and herself. Rangappa was vexed beyond measure. He really thought that he would have punished her properly only if he went away. But he did not go. And why? Rama and Bhima are going to school together. Rama has in his pocket a quantity of fried grain. Bhima's pocket is empty. What is it in your pocket, Rama? Nothing very much, a little fried grain. Rama, let us not give it to anyone else. Only we two shall eat it. But you cannot eat, you know. I put the remnant of my eating into it, and no one else can eat it. Oh, I do not mind eating the remnants of what you eat. But really, I cannot give you any of it. In that case, I shall give up friendship with you and go away. Well, give it up and go. Bhima has Rama's permission to give up friendship and go away. But he does not give it up and go. He stays on and moving somewhere near about, tries to resume relations with Rama. He wants the fried grain. Rangappa did not go away for the same reason. He, like Bhima, had desire. Ratnama was like Rama, who had the fried grain. Rangappa and Ratnama sat like this before the company for a long time. When the function was over, Rangappa left the place in disgust and walked to his room and thought over things. What nonsense is this? He said to himself. With what enthusiasm he had come from his village to meet this wife, and how badly she was behaving. For whom had he come? Was it not on her account? To see her and speak to her? Why did she not feel to him as he was feeling to her? As he had said previously, it was a silly girl, her mother's milk not yet dry on her lips. But then, what had to be done now? Having come, he should make further efforts to meet her and talk to her. Sitting in his room, Rangappa noticed that Ratnama passed in front of his door to go to the next room, which was hers. He heard also the sounds of her removing the jewels. He therefore strengthened his resolve as a lancer twirls his mustache and walked quickly into the other room. I shall go and speak to her, he said within himself, walking up, and if she does not reply, I shall abuse her and leave. The room was not very well lit. There, near the window, stood Ratnama. Hearing his step, she turned around. Who was it there? Rangappa. You've read the story of the cow and the tiger. I mean, the honest cow which the tiger stopped on its way to its calf and so on. As the cow was passing home, came along the tiger king. That's the text. Now, did Rangappa seem to Ratnama as the tiger king who came along seemed to the helpless cow, or did he not? I can hardly tell you. In any case, Ratnama just turned her face away again, so that he could not make out whether his coming pleased her or the contrary. Rangappa walked slowly up to where Ratnama was and standing beside her, looked at her face. Her body all ornaments and her face all eyes. Ratna was pregnant with the sandal which a few minutes earlier in the assembly he had offered to her as a courtesy. The charm of her looks was past description. What happened to his anger? Rangappa spoke with tremulous tenderness. Why did you not speak to me? There was no answer. Are you angry with me for any reason? What folly! They had not yet opened their eyes to life, and he was asking her if she was angry with him. Will you not speak to me? No answer. Rangappa was afraid that somebody might drop in and the colloquy might end. There might not be much time, and yet this girl was mute. Very well, I shall be going. With these words, Rangappa walked a step back. Ratnama then turned her head towards him a little and looked at him. Rangappa did not really wish to go away, and his goddess has become gracious and turned towards him. How could he throw away this chance after all the trouble he had taken? So he retraced his step and stood near Ratnama. Will you not speak to me? Why would I not speak to you? The goddess had put a question in reply to his question. Rangappa's delight was beyond all bounds. Why? His wife had spoken to him. What is the illusion in life that so blurs our vision? How many marriages should have taken place in this world till now? And yet each man who was married, on the occasion of his wife speaking to him for the first time, has felt as if he had come into the possession of an empire. What will each man's wife do but speak to him? She is made to speak to him, and it's only proper that she should. Indeed, no one can escape the fate. Again, whatever be the position until the wife does speak, there's never any lack of speaking after that, as men know and have always said. And yet, look at any young fellow, and on that day of his wife saying some words to him for the first time, he's floating on a sea of joy. I've heard of Socrates the philosopher, and his wife who poured filthy water on his erudite head in quarrel and abused him to enforce her argument. Did this poor philosopher also, on the day on which this termagant uttered a few words to him for the first time, feel that he was floating on a sea of joy? Who knows? Rangappa answered Ratnama's question. Then why did you not give a reply earlier? You came to the house in the morning, and have thought of seeing me and speaking to me only now. Why could you not think of me earlier? Rangappa was bowled over. He thought that she was a simple girl, and he was the hero, and he could blame her for not being as forward as he. But it looked as if he was not forward enough. This is the way of the world. As the poet has said, you think it a ruby and grasp it, but find it is live coal. Well, he had been beaten, but he felt strange pleasure in being vanquished. If you have a pretty wife, and she, while still young, acts the loving one and blames you for not being sufficiently attentive, you will experience the joy that Rangappa had that moment. That joy brightened that festival for him more than all the lights of the carnival without. Now, you young people who are hearing this will no doubt believe what I say. I am therefore very careful not to say anything that's not true and correct. I have therefore to verify details, and so asked Ratnama one day, telling her of this, if it was all correct. Rangappa was standing by and smiling. Go away, said Ratnama. You surely have better business. Well, you can, if you like, say it's correct. Otherwise, you may be silent, and I shall know what to think. How did you get all the story? I wonder who talks of these funny things to you. I shall tell you who. It was Ammaya. Oh, Ammaya. I suppose you do not know how accurate Ammaya is. Come to Ramabhatta's house tomorrow, and you will know the kind of story that gets about because of her. Next day I went to Ramabhatta's house. It was late in the afternoon. As usual, the young women of our households had gathered there, helping one another in braiding their hair, and were talking. Nowadays, these afternoon parties have been given up. I think it's a pity. In the town, neighbors live as strangers and do not meet unless there is some reason. So they have developed the habit of spending the afternoons reading some book. Those who do not know English may read some story of ours. Those who know English read anything that comes to their hands, any story or detective novel. In some of our villages, the old custom persists. I think it ought to become more common. That day I walked to Ramabhatta's house and stood near the door to hear what they were talking about. One of the young women said, "It seems he asked her to comb his hair." Another said, "His straggling grey hair, what a fashionable old man." A third one said, "Yes, but did you not hear the wife refused to do it? So the old man was angry and said that he would marry another wife and went to beat the poor woman." The first one said, "What a shame. Are people going to marry second wives hereafter at 60 years of age to comb their hair and plait it and put a fine coat on their person and send them out to the street as if they were little boys?" One of the elder ladies said, "What girls you are! Who told you all these things?" It seems Ammaya saw it all with her own eyes. "Oh, you silly girls! What talk is this? What does that innocent thing know? She says something and you understand something else. And you've been laughing at that old man the whole afternoon. Come, talk of something else." At this point, I called out, "Ramabhatta!" The voices ceased, and like scurrying mice, 3 or 4 of the young women got up and ran in. I walked into the company. They were all smiling. I am an old man, and may be forgiven some freedom. I've never seen flowers to beat a smile on the face of a woman young or old. It should have struck the ladies as a strange coincidence that I should have walked in just as they were speaking of me. An old lady said to me, "He is not at home," meaning Ramabhatta. "Oh," I said, "I thought so from the noise the girls were making." I was really not as vexed as I pretended to be. In fact, I was not vexed at all. Ratnama has organized the discussion to show the way in which Ammaya disclosed the things she heard and saw. Far from proving her inaccuracy, what I had overheard showed that in substance her replies and reports were reliable. Besides, I felt really happy that something I had done had provided matter for discussion to our young women for an afternoon, and caused them so much harmless amusement. Indeed, I've always wished to think of life in this way. It is for this reason I've told you today of Rangappa's Festival of Lights. If it has given you some little pleasure, I am very well rewarded. And that's all there for this story. It was charming, wasn't it? Really an incarnation of the old ways of life. Now, for those of you who don't know, Brain Blitz Audios is a YouTube channel exclusively devoted to providing free education content to all. If you'd like to be a part of our journey, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the video. See you soon. Until next time. Goodbye.